My father called me the spare. Not daughter, not younger, but exactly the spare. When my brother Nathan was given everything love, attention, a future all I got was silence and guilt. And when I took the blame for something I didn't do, I was kicked out the door with a black bag and a note. 17 years old. And here I am, standing on the doorstep, without a home, without money, without a family. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea that from that moment on, I would begin to grow up. I'm Lila, 28, female. And for as long as I can remember, I've been the spare. My father used to say it like a joke. Nathan's our star, and Lila's our safety net. He'd laugh, Mom would smile, that tight, awkward smile, and I'd pretend it didn't sting. But even as a kid, I understood what he meant. Nathan was the one who mattered. I was the backup plan, the extra life in a game I never agreed to play. Nathan, my brother, he's 2 years older, had the kind of charm that made adults melt. Straight A's, varsity athlete, volunteer hours, he probably faked, but still got praise for. Dad worshipped him, bragged about him to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who liked to draw and read. If I got an A, it was expected. If Nathan got a B, it was the teacher's fault. Mom was softer, but she was a peacekeeper, the kind who smoothed things over instead of fixing them. She'd tell me, "You know how your dad gets," whenever he'd snap at me for something Nathan did. I learned early that invisibility was safer than being right. The real divide started when I was 13. Nathan crashed Dad's car sneaking out to a party. I was asleep when it happened, but somehow by morning, it became my fault. "You should have stopped him," Dad said, pacing the kitchen like a prosecutor. "You're the responsible one." I remember standing there in my pajamas, mouth dry, heart pounding, trying to understand how I could be responsible for something I didn't even know about. Nathan didn't say a word, just kept staring at the floor. And that silence, it set the tone for the rest of my life. He messed up, I took the fall, every single time. Stolen money from Mom's purse, my forgetfulness, failed group project, my poor influence. When I finally started pushing back in high school, started actually talking back, Dad called me dramatic and ungrateful. The irony still makes me laugh. At 17, everything exploded. Nathan got caught cheating on his finals, not some small quiz, but a full academic integrity case. Expulsion level serious.
Hey guys, real quick before we keep going, don't forget to sub and drop a like if you're enjoying the story. Thank you very much. Enjoy watching.
But by the time the principal called home, the story had already been rewritten. Guess who helped him cheat? Me. I didn't even know about it until the meeting. Dad looked at me with this icy calm I'll never forget and said, "You're going to take responsibility, Lila. He has a scholarship riding on this." It wasn't a request. When I refused, he said something that still plays in my head when I can't sleep. "You were never going anywhere anyway." That night, I came home to find my stuff in a trash bag by the door and a note taped to it. "If you're old enough to cause problems, you're old enough to live with the consequences." I left with 47, a few shirts, and a heart that felt like it had been scraped hollow. I still remember the sound the trash bag made when I dragged it down the porch steps, that cheap crinkling plastic. It was the soundtrack to my exile. My own father's porch light glared behind me like an interrogation lamp, and I remember half expecting him to open the door and say, "All right, you made your point, come back in." He didn't. I ended up walking 2 miles to the only place I could think of, the gas station where I worked part-time after school. My manager, Chris, 34, female, found me sitting by the back dumpster, shivering and trying not to cry. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a hoodie from Lost and Found and let me sleep in the break room that night. That became my first home. I'd pull doubles at the register, mop floors, restock shelves, and then crash behind boxes of energy drinks. I'd shower in the sink before customers came in. I told everyone I was house-sitting for a friend. Nobody believed it, but no one pushed either. People in retail know better than to pry too much. It's strange. When you lose everything, you start to notice small kindnesses, like they're miracles. Chris slipping me leftover sandwiches from the deli. The old trucker who'd leave his change jar on the counter and wink. Even the janitor who tossed me an extra pair of gloves when the freezer work got bad. Meanwhile, Nathan was thriving. I'd see flashes of him on social media, new car, homecoming photos, proud family moments with captions like, "Hard work pays off." Mom would message me once in a while, short things like, "Are you eating? Please don't make things harder on your brother." That last one broke me more than the first night on the floor. Harder. Like I hadn't already been the family's emotional punching bag. By 18, I was working 3 jobs, gas station mornings, diner evenings, and weekend shifts at a craft store. No sleep, no days off, just grind. I saved enough for community college, then took night classes in marketing and design. Every semester felt like climbing out of a grave my family had buried me in. There were days I couldn't even afford bus fare, so I'd walk across town with my textbooks stuffed in a plastic grocery bag. I stopped checking my phone altogether. Hearing Nathan's name made me physically sick, but something changed around 20. I got good, really good. My design professor noticed my projects and started referring clients my way. Small logos, social media branding, local business work. Suddenly, I wasn't the spare. I was building something. I'll never forget the first time someone paid me $500 for a freelance job. I cried in the bathroom stall at the diner, shaking so hard the manager thought I was sick. That money wasn't just cash, it was proof. Proof that I could exist without being defined by what my family decided I was worth. When I finally graduated with my associate degree at 22, I didn't tell them. No calls, no photos, no invite. I walked that stage alone, wearing a thrifted gown that smelled faintly of someone else's perfume, and for the first time in my life, I felt enough. It wasn't glamorous, but it was freedom. Still, sometimes, late at night, I'd hear my dad's voice in my head. You were never going anywhere anyway. And I'd whisper back, watch me. After graduation, I stopped calling myself unlucky. I started calling myself building. At first, it was just freelancing from my tiny studio apartment, the kind of place where you can touch the stove and the bed at the same time. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor with my secondhand laptop, creating logos and brand kits for local businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. Half of them paid me in cash, a few paid me in gift cards, but it was mine. My work, my effort, my reputation slowly spreading, through word of mouth. By 24, I had enough steady clients to quit my diner job. That was terrifying. No safety net, no backup plan. I remember turning in my apron, walking out to my beat-up Honda Civic, and crying for 10 solid minutes. Not because I was scared, but because it finally felt like I was steering my own life. I poured everything into that business. I branded it Rootline Creative. The name came from something my grandmother once told me before she passed. The seed that survives the storm becomes the strongest root. She'd been the only one in my family who never treated me like a mistake. When I was little, she'd let me sit at her kitchen table sketching while she hummed old folk songs. She'd whisper, "You got your own light, Lila. Don't let them smother it." So, Rootline became my way of keeping her voice alive. At first, I took every gig I could get. Bakery logos, wedding invitations, even designing menu boards for food trucks. I barely slept, but the hustle started to pay off. I built a small online portfolio, learned how to pitch myself, and eventually landed my first real contract. A regional cafe chain wanted a full rebrand. That single project doubled my annual income. It was surreal watching people sip lattes under signs I designed. I'd walk by those cafes pretending I was just another customer, but inside I felt like screaming, I did this. That contract led to another, and another. I upgraded my software, built a team of part-time freelancers, and within a year, Rootline Creative was officially registered as an LLC. My name started popping up in local business magazines, Young Entrepreneur to Watch. Then came the moment that changed everything. The city's downtown revitalization project. They were holding a design contest for the campaign's new visual identity, billboards, murals, ads, the whole package, hundreds of applicants. I submitted mine at 2 a.m., fully convinced it would get buried. It didn't. A month later, I got the email. Congratulations, your design has been selected as the official face of the campaign. I screamed so loud my upstairs neighbor knocked on the ceiling. The first time I saw it, my own face smiling next to the words built from the ground up on a massive billboard. Downtown, I froze on the sidewalk. It felt like the world had tilted. Like I was standing exactly where I was supposed to be. And that's when it happened. The texts started coming in. At first, from distant relatives, "Saw you on that billboard. Your dad must be so proud." Then, from my mother, "Lila, your father and I were so surprised. We had no idea you'd done so well. Can we talk?" For the first time in nearly 10 years, they remembered I existed. And I knew deep down this wasn't pride, it was need. They hadn't changed. They just noticed the light they once tried to snuff out was now too bright to ignore. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. About a week after that first text, I came home from a client meeting to find my mother standing on my porch. Same pearl earrings, same pastel cardigan, same expression she used to wear when she wanted something. "Lila," she said, smiling too wide, like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. "It's been so long, sweetheart." For a second, I just stared. I hadn't seen her in almost 8 years, not since the night Dad threw me out. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but dimmer somehow. The kind of dim that comes from years of pretending you're fine. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, come on, honey, don't be like that," she said, waving her hand like we were just picking up after a minor disagreement. "I saw your face on that billboard. Your father and I were so proud." That word, proud, hit me like a punch to the ribs. I almost laughed. Then she said it, the real reason she was there. "Nathan's going through a rough patch right now," she began, lowering her voice like she was about to discuss some tragic family secret. "He and Megan, you remember Megan, his wife, they've been struggling. She's expecting, and with the baby on the way, they've fallen behind on rent. Your father thought, well, maybe you could help, just temporarily, until they get back on their feet." Help. That word again. Always a one-way street in our family. I let her talk about how Nathan just needs a little time, how Megan's hormonal, how family should stick together. Every sentence was dipped in guilt and sugar. Then she looked past me, peering into my entryway, her eyes landing on the framed certificate that read, Young Entrepreneur of the Year. "You've done so well for yourself," she said, softly. "You have space here, don't you? Maybe they could stay for a few months?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even frown. I just said, no. She blinked like she hadn't heard me. What? No, I repeated. They can't stay here. I worked too hard for this piece, and I won't hand it over to the same people who destroyed it. Her face changed instantly. That brittle smile cracked, revealing the venom underneath. Lila, don't be cruel. He's your brother. You know how your father would feel if he knew you were. I cut her off. He already knows how I feel. He made sure of it when he kicked me out with a trash bag. That shut her up, for a second anyway. Then came the tears. The trembling lip, the sniffles, the soft little sobs meant to trigger my old reflex. Comfort her, fix it, be the good daughter. I didn't move. I just stood there and watched her act. When she realized I wasn't folding, her voice went cold. You've changed, Lila. This isn't who I raised. You're right, I said. It's who I had to become. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked down the steps, muttering something about how success makes people heartless. I closed the door, locked it, sat on the couch, and let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 8 years. But here's the thing. The story didn't end with that slammed door. Because 2 days later, I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, my mother had been busy. She says you're refusing to help the family, my aunt texted, after all they've done for you. That one almost made me laugh. All they've done for me. The lies were spreading faster than I could breathe. And for the first time, I wasn't running from them. I was ready to fight back. Update. So, yeah, word got out. I didn't plan to post anything at first, but after getting a flood of calls and messages from relatives who suddenly remembered my number, I figured I should set the record straight, at least for myself. Half of them were guilt trips, family forgives, and the rest were insults. Success went to your head. One cousin even wrote, "You think a billboard makes you better than blood?" The irony is wild. Let me be clear. I didn't slam the door on my family because I'm bitter. I did it because I finally learned that letting them in means losing myself, and I refused to bleed just to keep their stories alive. The fallout after Mom's visit was insane. Within days, my business email, my professional email, was flooded with messages from people who hadn't spoken to me since high school. Aunts, uncles, random cousins, all pretending they just wanted to reconnect. But every conversation ended the same way. Your parents are going through a lot right now. Couldn't you help? Nathan didn't reach out himself, of course. He never does the dirty work. But I saw his wife's post online. Some dramatic caption about hard times showing who really cares. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew the truth. I had been the caretaker long before any of them bothered to ask if I was okay. The turning point came one night when I got a call from a blocked number. I knew that tone before the first word. My father. Lila, he said flatly. Your mother's upset. You didn't have to humiliate her. Humiliate her. That's what he called setting a boundary. You humiliated me when you left me on the porch with a trash bag, I said quietly. I just learned from the best. He went silent for a long time. Then, in that clipped tone he used when he wanted to sound rational, he said, You wouldn't have survived without us. That one almost made me laugh. You're right, I said. I didn't survive because of you. I survived in spite of you. I hung up. After that, I stopped explaining myself privately. I was done letting them narrate my life like I was still 17 and powerless. So I wrote one email, just one. I sent it to every relative who'd ever heard the Lila's selfish version of my story. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend who had conveniently forgotten how I got kicked out. It wasn't angry, it was factual, surgical. I wrote about the night I was exiled, the note on the trash bag, the years of taking the blame for Nathan's mistakes, the silence, the manipulation. I included the line my father wrote in that note. If you're old enough to cause problems, you're old enough to live with the consequences. Then I wrote, I did, and I built something beautiful from it. I hit send and didn't look back. The ripple effect was instant. 2 hours later, my cousin Jenna, the only one who'd ever been kind to me, texted, You just nuked the family group chat, and honestly, it was about time. Apparently Nathan's wife read the email. Then she read the rest of the family messages, all the ones where they blamed her for being too emotional, and told her she should be grateful for any help. By morning, she left him, packed up and moved in with her sister. Mom called 3 times that day. I didn't answer once. There was no satisfaction in it. Not really. Just a strange, deep quiet, the kind that feels like justice finally stopped holding its breath. When the dust from that email settled, I thought the silence would feel like peace. It didn't. Not at first. It felt like the quiet before a storm. 3 days after I sent it, my father showed up at my office. No warning, no call, no appointment, just appeared, like some ghost from a life I'd buried. My assistant buzzed me over the intercom, voice shaking. There's a man here insisting to see you. Says he's your dad. Every part of me wanted to hide. But instead, I said, send him in. He walked in like he owned the place, still in that same cheap suit and cologne that smelled like overcompensation. The years had aged him, but his pride, untouched. Nice setup, he said, glancing around at the minimalist office I'd built from nothing. Didn't realize you were doing this well. I didn't offer him a seat. You didn't realize a lot of things? He frowned, ignoring the jab. Your mother's distraught. Your email embarrassed her. Embarrassed all of us. I folded my arms. Then maybe you shouldn't have done the things I wrote about. That's when he snapped. His voice cracked. Not from weakness, but from rage. You always have to play the victim. You're not the only one who suffered, Lila. Your mother cried every night after you left. Nathan's struggling and I cut him off. He's struggling because for the first time in his life, no one's cleaning up after him. He slammed his fist on my desk. The sound made my assistant flinch outside. I didn't move. I just stared at him. The man who'd once scared me into silence now standing there. Smaller somehow, angrier at the truth than the lies that built his world. Finally, I said quietly, "You need to leave." He glared, breathing hard, eyes wet with something that wasn't quite remorse. Then he said it. The last card he had to play. "You'll regret this. Family always comes back around." "Not this time," I said. "Not mine." He left without another word. That night, the smear campaign began. Relatives unfriending me, Facebook posts about ungrateful children and how success makes people cruel. Even Mom joined in. Subtle things, like posting old photos of Nathan and me as kids with captions like, "Families go through rough patches, but love wins." Translation: she's lying, but we're too polite to say it out loud. The thing about truth, though, is it doesn't need defending. It just sits there, solid, unshakable, while lies collapse under their own weight. Within weeks, Rootline Creative got more business than ever. A few local journalists reached out after seeing my story circulate. Not the family gossip version, but the one about resilience. I didn't name names, but I spoke about rebuilding from nothing, about chosen family, about boundaries. People listened. Clients poured in. And then something unexpected happened. My grandmother's attorney called. Apparently she'd been in hospice for months, something no one bothered to tell me. My mother, predictably, had kept that from me too. The lawyer's voice was gentle, but the words hit like a stone. "She passed away last week, and she left something for you." I remember sitting there, completely still, as the room blurred around me. My grandmother, the only person who ever truly saw me, had gone. And yet, even from the grave, she was reaching out. I picked up the envelope from the law office the next morning. Inside was a short note in her looping handwriting. "For my Lila, the one who grew from ashes. I'm leaving you the house." And the truth I couldn't say aloud. Beneath it was a small brass key and a neatly tied box. Inside the box were stacks of old, leather-bound journals. Her handwriting filled every page. Dates, letters, observations. Years of quiet witnessing. Every cruel comment, every manipulation, every lie my parents ever spun to protect Nathan. She had written it all down. For the first time in my life, I held proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. And somehow I knew this was the real inheritance, not the house, the truth. Update 2. I've been sitting on this one for a while because even now, I don't fully know how to process it. After Grandma's funeral, I stayed behind at her house, the one she'd left me in her will. The air still smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Everything was exactly as she left it. The Afghan on the couch, the stack of crossword puzzles, the teacups lined up by the sink. It didn't feel like an inheritance. It felt like being handed a piece of her heart and being told, "Take care of it. It's yours now." I spent the next few nights reading her journals. Page after page, she chronicled everything, from Nathan's first lie to the day I was kicked out. She wrote about the favoritism she couldn't stop, the guilt she carried for not standing up more. There were entries about my drawings on her kitchen table, about how she'd seen something bright in me that no one else bothered to look for. But then, somewhere in the later journals, the tone shifted. She wrote about them, my parents, and how their obsession with control had turned into something darker. One entry made my blood run cold. "Rick told me tonight that he's done helping Lila until she learns her place. I told him that child never asked for anything but love. Grace cried, said she's tired of being in the middle. I told her if she keeps choosing silence, she'll lose both her children, one to arrogance, the other to grief." It was all there. Every manipulation, every lie. Even small details I'd forgotten, written in her steady hand, like she was recording evidence for someone she knew would need it one day. And she was right. I digitized the journals. Not to publish them, not to expose, but to preserve. They were her truth and mine. I read them at night, crying, sometimes laughing, sometimes shaking, with the kind of relief that feels almost painful. 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at the house. I heard their voices before I saw them. Mom's high-pitched pleading tone and Dad's low, commanding one. They were standing by the front gate like they owned the place, holding flowers that looked like they'd been grabbed from a gas station cooler. "Lila," Mom said when she saw me, "we didn't know how else to reach you. Please, honey, just let us in. We need to talk." Dad added, "We're family. We can't let this ugliness go on forever." For a moment, I felt the old pull, that instinct to fix, to fold, to say fine, come in. But then I remembered my grandmother's words, written in the final page of her last journal. "Peace is a home you build and defend." So I opened the door just enough to look them in the eyes. "No," I said simply. "You don't get to come in, not anymore." Mom's face crumpled. "Lila, your grandmother would want us to." "She did want peace," I said. "That's why she left the house to me, not you." Dad's jaw tightened. "We could challenge that, Will." I met his gaze, calm and steady. You could try, but her journals document everything you did, in your own words, your own handwriting. You want to go to court? Let's make it public. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in my father's eyes. Not of me, but of truth. He turned without another word and walked back to the car. Mom hesitated, tears streaking her makeup. You become so cold, she whispered. No, I said quietly. I've become warm enough to stop freezing for you. They left. The sound of their car fading down the road felt like the final exhale of a ghost I'd been living with my whole life. That night, I framed something. Not a photo, not a diploma. The note my father left me the night he threw me out. The one taped to that trash bag. I pressed it between glass and hung it beside my business award. 2 relics of the same story, the beginning and the ending. Except this time, I got to write the last line. The house felt different after that. Still and steady, like it had finally exhaled. I spent the next few months restoring it, not changing, just caring. I sanded the floors, repainted the porch, and filled the garden with flowers my grandmother used to grow. Lavender, marigolds, hydrangeas. The yard bloomed again, quietly, stubbornly. A living prayer in color. I kept working at Rootline Creative, but I slowed down. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing survival or success. I was just living. Mornings meant coffee on the porch swing. Evenings meant sunsets that spilled gold across the fence line. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling for no reason, just because the air finally felt safe to breathe. People still asked about my family sometimes. Reporters, old classmates, even clients. I'd always answer the same way. They're part of my story, but not part of my life. No bitterness, just truth. Nathan never reached out again. Last I heard, he moved out of state after Megan left him. Mom still posts those passive-aggressive Facebook quotes about forgiveness, and Dad's apparently obsessed with golf now. A quieter, smaller life than the one he used to lord over us. I don't hate them. I just don't owe them anything. The journal stayed with me. I read one every year on my birthday, a reminder of where I came from and how far I've gone. Eventually, I donated copies to a local women's advocacy group that helps girls aging out of foster care. They use the stories for mentorship training to teach resilience. My grandmother's words, her honesty, became seeds for other people's healing. She'd have liked that. One night, while cleaning out the attic, I found one last thing of hers, a small box wrapped in twine. Inside was a single, folded note in her handwriting. The world called you the spare. I called you the seed. The seed survives the fire because it was never meant to be ornamental. It was meant to grow. I cried like I hadn't in years, not from sadness, from release. The next morning, I hung that note beside the framed letter my father had left me. Side by side, they told the whole story, rejection and redemption, ending and rebirth. One was written out of cruelty, the other out of love. And between them, on the same wall, hung the plaque from my first big campaign, the one that read, "Built from the ground up." Sometimes visitors ask about it. I tell them the truth. That wall is my family portrait. Now, when I walk through the house she left me, I can feel her everywhere, in the creak of the floorboards, in the smell of lavender, in the stillness after rain. I think she'd be proud of how the story ended, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with boundaries and peace. I'm not the spare anymore. I'm the seed that survived, rooted in truth. Blooming in the garden she called a living prayer.